Hey there. My name is Michael Krasinski. I am the owner and founder and head coach of PowderStrong here in Salt Lake City, and also the lead coach of our field program, which is our remote program for mountain and endurance athletes. My goal with all of my content is to provide you with actionable and thoughtful, reasonable information that you can use to kick ass in the mountains in the short term, the category that I call performance, in the midterm and be able to do it for a lot for long days and long seasons, what I consider durability and injury resilience, and finally for decades to come, what I categorize as longevity. So performance, durability, and longevity. That's what we're about here. That's what I want to give you. And that's kind of what we're going to talk through today. Excuse me, as we get started. So I'm going to share my screen because I have put together some slides for you that I want you to be able to see. So here we go. Let me just get this into boop boop boop. I'll show you how often I use Google Sheets or Google Slides, I guess. So let's talk about building strong and durable legs. And to be really clear, this is about PowderStrong and PowderStrong specifically for this year, 2025. We've been running the PowderStrong program at our gym in Salt Lake City for about 8 years now. And every year it evolves a little bit. The very first year, we were very strength heavy and we did a little bit of conditioning. And then we got feedback that people felt really strong and they didn't get hurt. They felt really stable, but they didn't have as much juice as they wanted to have. So the second year, we started incorporating a little bit more of some of the muscular endurance and work capacity stuff that we do now. The program has been morphing over the years. This year, our big shift is really the incorporation of more deliberate plyometric work of a few different sorts and actually rethinking the frequency of which we're hitting certain aspects of training. And then finally, putting into our programming a new category that we call positional resilience. And I'll tell you more what I mean about this. So, in short, if you are thinking about joining PowderStrong or if you've already joined PowderStrong for the year, this is what you can look forward to. This is the way that our heads work when we're writing the programming for PowderStrong. And if you're not joining PowderStrong this year, that's okay. These ideas, I think, are a lens that you can use to look at all of your training programs. And if you have a training program for ski that has aspects that aren't included here, doesn't mean it's wrong. But if there are aspects that are included here that are missing from your training program, that might actually be a thing to consider. And if you're interested in how you might embed that in, please just send me a message, send me an email. Again, my first goal is to be helpful. I make a business out of being helpful, but I'm also more than happy to offer some input if you'd like to ask. Love to hear from you. So let's get into this. I love pyramids. I love pyramids. They have this inherent vision of saying these things are at the bottom, this is the foundation, and we layer stuff up on top of that. So let's get right into it. The very bottom of this pyramid, sorry for the double tap, is our ability to stabilize our pelvis. And remember, we're talking about building legs that are strong and durable for long days on the snow. And your skis or your snowboard are inherently unstable structures. They're sliding, they're moving. We're not consistently connected to the ground. Even if we're on a snowboard where our feet are in a constant position relative to each other while we're riding and while we're strapped in, at least, the world around us is unstable. And so, in order for our legs to be able to generate power, they have to have something stable to attach to. And since that thing isn't the ground, because the ground is moving underneath us, the only thing they can stabilize to is the pelvis. And if the pelvis is itself unstable, man, the legs just don't have anything strong to pull from. It's a very overly simplistic analogy, but just imagine trying to set up a tent on the beach where the only thing that you have are your like standard, 8-inch tent stakes, and you're trying to put those tent stakes into the sand. But sand is shifting, sand moves, it's unstable. It's really, really hard it's almost impossible maybe to tighten those guy lines enough on the tent in order for the tent to be really stable and have all the interior space that we would want. Stability of a part of the system is important. And when it comes to muscular engagement, one of the things that can go wrong is that we don't have a stable pelvis. So, how would we stabilize it? I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Within a training program, one easy way to do this is actually start off with some stability training for the pelvis. And this could be in the warm up. And these are static or semi static exercises like dead bugs, where we lay on the back and we're moving opposite arm and leg, or roll ups, kind of a Pilates style roll up. And a roll up is, of course, not a static exercise. The dead bug isn't either. But in both cases, we actually have this very strong emphasis on maintaining a braced and engaged in a core, for lack of a better term. The better term, of course, is the tactical chassis, which I'll get to next. The second category here, if the first category is static, the second category is going to be kinetic or dynamic. And so these are movements where we're not trying to move the spine extensively, but we're moving the body in more dynamic ways that might mimic or at least kind of look like movements that we would see when we're out on the snow or on a mountain bike or on a trail run. So exercises like landmine cauldrons, where we have a barbell that is affixed at one end and we're trying to move it around in the biggest circle, like we're stirring the world's biggest pot of stew, i.e. the cauldron. Landmine Russian twists, where we're taking that landmine barbell and moving it up and over. Sandbag down and ups, which is basically a kettlebell get up, but with a sandbag and starting from the top. And a kettlebell slasher to halo, which is a dynamic hip rotation exercise. And you can find actually all six of these exercises and everything I talk about in this presentation. You can find demo videos for all of these on the Mountain Strong YouTube channel. Just open up youtube.com, search for Mountain Strong, MTN, STRNG. You'll find demo videos for all of these exercises. So when we think about training the pelvis to be stable, it's as simple as doing it in the warm up and then doing it in a finisher. And in PowderStrong this year, we're going to be training chassis integrity almost every session because it is that important. If the pelvis isn't stable, then the rest of the body doesn't have something to pull on. It has a reduced ability to transfer power. So let's get back to our triangle here, to our pyramid. The second piece is positional readiness. And I started using this language of positional readiness probably 2 or 3 months ago. And at first I had this, I had a little bit of a misgiving about it. I'll tell you that honestly. And my misgiving was that if I'm telling someone, hey, you have to be ready to do the thing that you're going to do, am I starting to venture too far down the rabbit hole of quote unquote corrective exercises and like remedial things and things where we're wildly underloading? And I've thought about it a little bit more. And I've actually decided that thinking about positional readiness is actually an essential component of being able to train well and train hard. And so positional readiness just means that in a training session, we might spend 2 or 3 or 5 minutes training for specific positions. And in this case, since we're talking about the legs, we're talking about what happens at the knee and what happens at the hip. And if we spend that time, then we're ready to train really hard. And if we don't spend that time, then we're more likely to kind of get into bad positions when we're doing heavier things like our strength training. And I challenge you to just take a guess as to where strength is going to sit in this pyramid. I'll give you a hint. It's not at the top. So positional readiness. This breaks down for us for the lower body into really three categories. The first is hip internal rotation. So if you're just sitting on a bench and you think about pulling your right foot out to the right side where your thigh is rotating towards center, that is hip internal rotation. And an exercise like a front foot elevated split squat is a really good way to train that or to warm that up. And yes, there is stretching we can do for internal rotation of the hips. And it's interestingly, it's a really hard thing to get in kind of a yoga class. Like it isn't, I feel like it isn't very common. Most of the time, yoga is training external rotation. And if we sit, especially if we sit cross-legged, I'm sitting cross-legged on my stool right now, that's all external rotation. And what's interesting is if we spend enough time externally rotated, we can actually lose our capacity for internal rotation. And we need both. Hip external rotation. Again, if you want to stretch, it might look like pigeon in a yoga class. But if we want to do this with strength, it looks like exercises such as a sumo deadlift. And the third big category for positional readiness, and I have been blown away by the value of this work, is getting into deep knee flexion. And by deep knee flexion, I just mean putting your knee in a position where it is so bent that your butt and your heel are touching. And we can do that through exercises like a knees over toe sissy squat or split squat rather, or we can do this with sissy squats. The benefit of getting into deep knee flexion is almost really simple. We almost never go there. When you ski, you're never sitting that deep, that far down on your heel. You're never bending your knee that far. Even if you're a tele skier, you're just not bending the knee that far. If you run, your knee doesn't bend that far. If you bike, the knee doesn't bend that far. This range of motion where we're in a really deep degree of knee flexion is something that we almost only do if we try to do it. And if you don't do it, if you don't try to do it, then what you'll find at some point in the future is that maybe you can't. And then when you want to sit on the floor, like you want to you want to sit on both knees on the floor to play with a kid, read a book, eat some ice cream, I don't know, you might find that that capacity isn't there. And having that capacity, having more range of motion than you need is really protective of joints. So we always want to be thinking, hey, how do I maximize range of motion? And honestly, not just through stretching. Stretching's not bad, but very often prepping your tissues through positional readiness in a warm up, in part of a workout, and then getting into your strength work is a really good way to go. And that's how we do it at Mountain Strong, and that's how we program it for Powder Strong. And I did just give you the hint. I gave you the answer. Strength is up next. So strength is really the ability to generate force for relatively low duration, relatively low periods of time. Uh, you know, the individual who can accelerate really fast into a sprint is demonstrating a lot of strength in that quick acceleration. But as soon as that quote unquote sprint is, lasting more than a minute, then their raw strength is no longer going to be the primary factor. So we are talking about short domain. So strength for us with Powder Strong is really going to come down to two primary aspects. Our ability to hinge, which is what happens when you lean forward over a straight or an almost straight leg, that's a hinge. And then when you go forward and you also bend the knee a lot so you can go down, that's a squat, right? So a hinge is a hip movement and a squat is a combination of a hip movement with a knee movement. So for hinges, we really like two primary exercises, a stiff-legged deadlift and a single-leg deadlift. If we hit those two regularly, we can build strength through the hamstrings and the glutes, which is going to be really important for the season of skiing to keep our legs working well, keep our knees feeling great. It's an interesting idea. When we ski, we or snowboard, we use a lot of quads. The quad is a dominant muscle, is a prime mover for skiing and snowboarding. However, the quad is balanced on the backside by the hamstring. And if we get to the place where our quads are really weak and our quads are really strong and our hamstrings are weak, the hamstring can't adequately protect the knee against all of the forces that it faces. And so, if you do your preseason ski training and you don't train your hamstrings, you just think about quads, you're starting the season with that imbalance. But even if you train them both going into the ski season, your hamstrings are essential for skiing, but they don't get trained very well at skiing by skiing. And so we can actually see some of that hamstring strength drop off over the season. So I'll actually tell you that I think a stiff-legged deadlift and a single leg deadlift executed, each of those executed once a week through the ski season is going to be one of the keys to having a ski season that feels good beginning to end. It's also a key to being able to transition from your ski season into your spring riding or running or hiking, whatever it is that you're going to do on your feet. If you've lost a whole bunch of hamstring strength, you're going to want to get that back before you start doing other things. If you've trained it lightly, just literally, a few sets of each across the winter, spring is going to feel a lot better too. The other piece here is our work in the squat motor pattern. And this is again, deep hip flexion with deep knee flexion, a rear foot elevated split squat and a heel elevated goblet squat. This will work the quads and also the glutes, especially in the rear foot elevated split squat. This will work really well. And again, if you have questions or interested in these exercises, I hope you'll check out our YouTube channel for our demo videos and deep dives on these exercises. So after strength, what's next? Well, the next piece of our pyramid is power. And I really do believe that the way that we should prioritize our training is saying, hey, if our pelvis isn't stable, we don't move up the pyramid. And if we don't have positional readiness, we don't move into strength. And to a degree, this is even the order in which we might program a training session, except for power. Power is the one thing that I would bring down to our stable pelvis, to right after a stable pelvis. Once we're warmed up and the pelvis is stable, we know how to control that, we can brace effectively. That's the right time to start developing power because power training is draining on the nervous system. It will feel like if we do it well, it zaps some of our energy. And so we want to actually get that out of the way first so that we aren't doing it when we don't have as much energy available. The other way of saying this is the higher the relative intensity or the higher the weight, the higher the load and the faster we're trying to move it, the more expensive it is to the nervous system. And that actually means that we want to train those expensive things first so that we are freshest and we can get the most out of it. Yeah, if you do a bunch of power training, you'll be a little bit more fatigued going into your strength work, but it won't limit you the same way as doing your strength work first can limit you going into your power training. And if you're limited going to your power training, you just don't get as much out of it. We could argue that sometimes it's not worth doing. So power, going to come into two categories first. First, we have our plyometric work. These are our leaps, our bounds, and our hops. Leap is anytime we've got 2 feet bouncing on the ground at the same time. Bounds are when we're moving from left foot to right foot, left to right foot. And then hops are going to be right, 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 right. So leap is 2 feet at all times. Bound is single foot alternating, and a hop is single foot repeated. And as we go through, if we scale it from leaps to bounds to hops, we're going from lower intensity to higher intensity. And there's an infinite number of variations of exercises within these three categories. Again, I'll just drop our YouTube channel for you as a recommended source for information. But you want to do some of this because it's really, really good for developing tendon strength. It's really good for developing that quick, snappy athleticism that's really helpful when we're skiing. I'll share a story. I've had a problem in my cross country skiing for the last few years where when I push off from my right foot, specifically skate skiing, I'll push off from my right in order to coast on my left. My left ankle has felt really unstable and I just couldn't get like a good solid feeling of balance on my left foot. And then what would happen is I'd push off my left to skate on my right. And while I can balance well on my right, that push off on my left was also kind of insufficient. And my left leg is plenty strong. I can do equal number of calf raises on both legs for the most part. But what was really missing was this balance and forefoot pressure component of work on my left foot. And what I found was I was very often sitting into my heels and my left ski especially would kick out in front of me. My plyometric work over the last 6 months really, where I've been putting a lot of emphasis in the forefoot, basically just behind the toes and right at the ball of the foot. All of that effort I'm expecting to pay off a lot and to feel much more stable when I get into my Nordic and skate skiing this year. My work on plyometrics has improved dramatically. My ability to hop on my left foot and stay like really stable on my foot and land well has been improving. It is entirely reasonable for me to expect that carryover for Nordic. I just don't have that data yet, but of course I'll share it with you. And our second big category for power work is max power. So this is when we are trying to jump high and land well. So this could be exercises like box jumps. If you execute box jumps, I'd encourage you to step down unless you are deliberately doing and this is a deliberate reason not to. If you're trying to develop max vertical power, always step down off your box jump. You're going to be putting a lot of load through your tendons of your Achilles and through your calves. Don't bounce off the floor. That's not the skill we're looking for right now. You're almost doing that bounding work in your plyos. So box jumps, we're looking at max power, and then depth drop, or a depth jump rather, is coming off of a box, hitting the ground with with a little bit of a squat, and then bounding vertically or forward or laterally into that next jump. Between box jump and depth jumps, we can develop a lot of power to support us in terms of high quality landing, some quad strength, and really our ability to move quickly and very responsively to an environment. So the very top of our pyramid, we're going to get into endurance. And there was an initial version of this slide where I was going to split hairs between systemic endurance and local or muscular endurance. The reality is there's not much difference. Sometimes we'll talk about, and sometimes some personal trainers or coaches will talk about the notion of building muscular endurance, and they'll say, if you're doing 20 or more reps or 15 more reps, what we're primarily doing is muscular endurance training. Well, I mean, we are, but doing 15 reps of a squat and skiing down that, and let's say those 15 reps takes you 45 seconds to complete, or you are in a downhill run, you're skiing top to bottom at snowbird and it's going to take you 15 minutes. There is there's no there's no carryover, right? It isn't, it's not a one for one, it's not the same. So instead, we're going to break endurance down into three categories, and we're going to talk about them separately. So first, if we do want to talk about muscular endurance, which is a useful notion, leg blasters are our go-to. We do 20 body weight squats, 20 body weight alternating rear lunges, 20 alternating jump lunges, and then finish it up with 10 jump squats. Rest for anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds, maybe even 2 minutes, and then do that again for 4 or 5 or 6 rounds. It's going to build a lot of strength in the quad, and it's going to really improve our ability to keep going like through the burn. And that is going to help with local muscular endurance quite a bit. The second type of endurance we can think of as zone two or zone two and a little bit of zone three endurance with, say, loaded step ups. This is useful. It's easy to argue this as being useful if you're spending time in the backcountry and you're spending time touring. But even if you're not, your zone two, your zone three endurance, this is your aerobic or low anaerobic endurance, spending time with 20 or 30 or 40 pounds in a backpack or a weight vest and, do 30 minutes or 60 minutes of step ups to a box. That will help your zone two endurance dramatically. You could also run, you could ruck, you could go hike uphill, you could get on a bike. Any of that stuff can work. Uh, hi, Rachel. Um, any of that stuff can work. What you really,
Sorry if I'm messing up your recording.
yeah, I will meet. I will. I'm gonna mute you. Thank you.
Okay.
Um, so our zone two, three endurance, right? It doesn't matter if we do it with box step ups, if we do this on a bike, if we do this on a run or a ruck. Putting in that zone two endurance, that anaerobic, or sorry, that low anaerobic and high aerobic endurance is going to pay off when we get out into the mountains, and it's going to help our legs feel fresher longer. And then finally, let's talk about zone three and zone four endurance. And when I talk about these endurance systems or these endurance zones, this is all based on a 5 zone system. So zone three is our kind of mid anaerobic endurance. So we're using more glycogen and we're, less of a fat burning zone, right? More glucose based. And then zone four is right up and a little bit above our lactate threshold. So this we're talking about interval work here where we could only sustain it for short periods of time. Within PowderStrong, we use touch dump touch intervals. This has been our go-to for several years now, probably for the last 6 years. We've been really leaning into touch dump touch intervals because what this lets us do is set a baseline of, say, a 2-minute test. And this is what we'll do this year. We'll start off with a 2-minute test. And, for 2 minutes, do as many reps as you can. And the touch dump touch is a lateral jump onto a box, off the box on the other side, touch the ground, cycle back over and repeat. We do as many reps as we can in 2 minutes. We take 1/3 of that number. So if you do, I don't know, 60 reps, then your count is 20, and you're going to repeat that number every minute on the minute for another 8 minutes. So that means for those of us who are working with a high degree of fitness, we get to do a lot of work. For those of us who are working with a moderate or lower degree of fitness, we're going to do less work, but it's incredibly scalable to wherever we're starting from. And again, what we're trying to do is get better at suffering through that high output stuff. The combination the combination of these three together is going to give us a really solid foundation to work with. Mm-mm-mm. And one of my friend Rachel jumped on and jumped off, and she said she felt bad about messing up the recording. Honestly, Rachel, if you're watching this on replay, I actually loved seeing your name. It was really good to it was good to see you, and you absolutely could have stayed on and asked questions if you wanted to. So we are actually getting right to we're at literally at the end of the deck. Um, and what I want to offer, just as a way of summary and a way of framing this. I believe that any ski snowboard training program that is going to be of high quality is going to include some aspect of all of these things. It might use these names, it might not. It might use these titles, it might not. They might put them in different orders in a training program. But if you look through it and you don't see any, you see one of these things is missing, I would honestly encourage you to look at other programs or to consider how could you blend these pieces into your program. It is entirely reasonable to have a program that hits all five of these aspects adequately over 3 days a week, even 2 days a week. You know, if it's a 10-week program and you're training 2 days a week, that's 20 sessions. We can absolutely make this stuff happen in those 20 sessions. And if you're going to do 3 days a week and 30 sessions, even better. So, two things. One, actually, three things. Thing one, if you are interested in PowderStrong, please reach out to me. Let me know. We can certainly talk about it. We can hop on the phone and talk about you and what exactly you're looking for and if the program's a good fit. If you are in Salt Lake City, then your first step would actually be to sign up and do an assessment with me. Because what I want to do is make sure that the programming that exists for PowderStrong and this programming is going to serve you really well. And if it's not, I want to tell you what I think would be better. And I will certainly offer options with us, but it's also entirely fair to say that you're going to go and find those things somewhere else. That's absolutely okay. That's the kind of transparency and honesty that I've built this business on. The second thing is if you are interested in PowderStrong, do me a favor and mention that you watched to the end of this video. And whether you're working through field, online, and remote, or if you're coming in and joining us with the gym, you tell me you watched all through the end of this, and I will take 10% off of the cost for PowderStrong. That's the Easter egg. That's the little like gimme for this little gift for getting to the end of this. And third is if you're not joining us for PowderStrong, if you're doing another program, if you're putting something together for yourself and you just have questions about how to integrate this philosophy and these training components into your program, again, I encourage you to reach out. We'll schedule a 15-minute call. I'll be as helpful as I can in those 15 minutes. I'm not, and it's not going to be a sales pitch. I'm not going to say this looks like a terrible program. Every time I've looked at some other program, there's something that I've learned. There is something that I've been able to take away. The way that we implement plyos in PowderStrong now is actually very much the result of looking at a couple of other coaches' programs a few years ago and realizing that they were right and that our program missing plyos was actually a missed opportunity in doing the best things for our athletes. So whenever I talk to people about their programs, inevitably I learn something as well. And so there's definitely a two-way thing there. So short version, if you would like to talk through the program you're looking at or what you're doing for your preseason ski training this fall, whether it's your program or something that you bought from somebody else, I'd be happy to take a look at it. I'd be honored to just offer my input, my advice, and my thoughts. That is it. Thank you so much for hanging out with me through this one, and I will talk to you very soon. Good night.